The gunshot echoed through the pine-covered mountains like thunder, and Rebecca Vaughn knew, without looking, that the men tracking her had gotten closer than she thought possible. She had been running for 3 days now, ever since she witnessed what she should never have seen in the mining camp outside Virginia City. The ledger she carried in her saddlebag contained proof that the foreman and 5 of his most trusted men had been skimming gold from the company for months, selling it to crooked dealers in California and pocketing thousands of dollars. Rebecca had been working as a bookkeeper for the mining company, one of the few respectable positions available to a woman in Nevada Territory in 1871, and her sharp eye for numbers had caught the discrepancies. She should have gone to the sheriff immediately, but the foreman, Carl Mathers, had friends in every office in Virginia City. So she ran, hoping to make it to Carson City, where she had a cousin who worked for the territorial governor. But Mathers had sent 6 of his men after her, and they were gaining ground. Rebecca's horse stumbled on the rocky trail, and she pulled hard on the reins, her heart hammering. The mare was exhausted, foam flecking her neck, and Rebecca knew they could not keep this pace much longer. The October air was crisp and cold at this elevation, and her breath came out in visible puffs as she scanned the landscape desperately. She had veered off the main trail hours ago, hoping to lose them in the wilderness, but it seemed they were expert trackers. Another shot rang out, this one closer, and the bullet struck a tree trunk not 10 feet from where she sat. Rebecca did not wait. She dug her heels into her horse's flanks and urged the animal forward, ducking low over the saddle as branches whipped past her face. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins, streaming behind her like a banner, and her split riding skirt was torn and dusty. At 23 years old, she had never imagined her life would come to this, fleeing for her life through the Sierra Nevada with stolen evidence and killers on her trail. The trees opened up suddenly into a small clearing, and Rebecca saw a thin column of smoke rising from somewhere beyond the next ridge. Civilization, or at least a camp. She had no choice but to head toward it and pray that whoever was there would not be in league with Mathers. She pushed her horse harder, and the animal responded with a burst of speed born from pure terror. Behind her, she could hear shouting now, the men calling to each other as they coordinated their pursuit. They were close enough that she could make out individual voices, and her blood ran cold. Rebecca crested the ridge and nearly sobbed with relief. Below, in a protected hollow, stood a small log cabin with a corral beside it. A single horse grazed in the enclosure, and smoke drifted lazily from the stone chimney. She did not see anyone outside, but she urged her horse down the slope anyway, rocks sliding beneath the mare's hooves. "Help!" she called out, her voice cracking. "Please, someone help me." The cabin door opened, and a man stepped out onto the narrow porch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the mountains around them. He wore worn denim pants, a dark shirt, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. His eyes, even from a distance, were the color of storm clouds, and they assessed the situation with the quick calculation of someone who had seen trouble before. "Riders coming," Rebecca gasped as she pulled her horse to a halt in front of the cabin. "6 men. They mean to kill me." The man did not ask questions. That was the first thing Rebecca noticed about him. He simply nodded once, then turned back to the cabin. "Get inside. Stay low and away from the windows." Rebecca dismounted on shaking legs, grabbed her saddlebag, and stumbled toward the cabin. The man was already pulling a rifle from a rack on the wall, checking the ammunition with practiced efficiency. He moved to the window and peered out, his jaw tightening. "I count 6, he said, his voice low and steady. They are spreading out, trying to surround the cabin. You picked the wrong people to anger, miss. I did not pick anything, Rebecca said, her voice sharp with fear and indignation. I discovered they were stealing, and now they want me dead before I can report them. The man glanced at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or understanding. Then I suppose we better make sure they do not get what they want. Why are you helping me? Rebecca asked. You do not even know me. Do not need to know you to know right from wrong, he replied. Then he opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Rebecca rushed to the window, pressing herself against the wall as she peered out. The 6 men had reached the clearing and were approaching cautiously, their weapons drawn. She recognized them all: Jake Miller, Tom Hodges, Samuel Prine, Billy Watson, Frank Delaney, and the worst of them, Cutter Hayes, who had earned his nickname from his fondness for knife work. That is far enough, the man from the cabin called out. His voice carried across the clearing with absolute authority. The woman is under my protection. Turn around and ride back where you came from. Cutter Hayes laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. This is none of your concern, stranger. That woman stole from our employer. We are just taking her back to face justice. If that were true, you would not be firing shots at her in the mountains, the man replied. You would have gotten the sheriff, so let us not pretend this is about justice. Last chance. Ride away. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She wanted to call out to tell him that these were dangerous men, killers who would not hesitate to shoot him down. But something about the way he stood there, utterly calm and utterly sure, made her hold her tongue. Jake Miller raised his rifle. We outnumber you 6-1, cowboy. Hand over the woman and we will let you live. No, the man said simply. Then everything happened at once. Miller fired first, but the cowboy was already moving, his hand a blur as he drew his pistol. The shot from Miller's rifle went wide, splintering wood on the cabin wall, and the cowboy's return fire was precise and deadly. Miller fell from his saddle, hitting the ground hard. The clearing erupted into chaos. The 5 remaining men scattered, some dismounting to find cover behind trees and rocks, others trying to circle around for a better angle. The cowboy fired twice more in rapid succession, each shot finding its mark. Samuel Prine clutched his chest and toppled backward, and Billy Watson went down with a scream, his leg shattered. Rebecca watched in stunned horror as the cowboy moved with lethal grace, his expression never changing from that calm, focused intensity. He had shot 3 men in less than 5 seconds, and the remaining 3 were already backing away, their confidence shattered. You killed them, Frank Delaney shouted, his voice high with panic. You murdered them in cold blood. They fired first, the cowboy replied, reloading his weapon with smooth efficiency. Now you have got a choice. You can join your friends in the dirt, or you can get on your horses and ride out of here. If I ever see any of you within 100 miles of this place again, I will not be so generous. Tom Hodges was already mounting his horse, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped his reins. This is not over, he spat, but there was no conviction in his voice. Yes, the cowboy said quietly, it is. He raised his pistol and fired once more, the bullet kicking up dirt right between Hodges' horse's front hooves. The animal reared, and Hodges had to fight to stay in the saddle. When he got control, he wheeled the horse around and spurred it into a gallop. Frank Delaney and Cutter Hayes exchanged a look, then followed, abandoning their wounded and dead companions without a second glance. Billy Watson, still alive but bleeding badly from his leg, tried to crawl toward his horse. The cowboy walked over, picked up the man's fallen rifle, and tossed it far into the brush. Best get that leg bandaged before you bleed out, he said. Then I suggest you follow your friends and never come back. Watson nodded frantically, pulling off his belt to use as a tourniquet. The cowboy watched him for a moment, then returned to the cabin. Rebecca stepped back from the window as he entered, her whole body trembling. The man set his rifle back on the rack, then moved to the stove where a pot of coffee sat warming. He poured 2 cups with steady hands, as if he had not just shot 4 men and sent 2 others fleeing for their lives. "You should sit down," he said, offering her one of the cups. "You look like you might fall over." Rebecca took the cup automatically, though her hands shook so badly the coffee sloshed over the rim. She sat down hard in the room's only chair, staring at him. "You killed them. You just killed 3 men. 4, probably," he corrected. "The one I shot in the chest will not make it through the night without a doctor, and the nearest doctor is 2 days' ride from here. He will not get that far." "How can you be so calm?" Rebecca asked, her voice rising. "You took 4 lives in less than a minute." The man took a sip of his coffee, his gray eyes meeting hers over the rim of the cup. "Because they would have taken yours without blinking, and then they would have taken mine. I have been in this territory long enough to know when talking is done and action is required. I am sorry you had to see it, but I am not sorry I did it." Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Who are you?" "Name is Zachary Sullivan," he said. "Most people just call me Zach. I trap and hunt these mountains, sell the furs in Unionville when I have enough to make the trip worth it. Been living up here about 5 years now." "I am Rebecca Vaughn," she managed. "I worked as a bookkeeper in Virginia City until 3 days ago." Zach nodded, as if this explained everything. "Mining town. Should have guessed. Those camps breed trouble like mosquitoes breed in swamp water. What did you see that sent them after you?" Rebecca told him everything, the words spilling out in a rush now that the immediate danger had passed. She told him about the discrepancies in the ledgers, about confronting the foreman, about the way Carl Mather's face had gone cold and hard when he realized she knew what he had been doing. She told him how she had fled in the night, taking the evidence with her, and how she had been running ever since. Zach listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if it held answers. "Carson City is 4 days from here if you take the direct route," he finally said. "But those men know that is where you are heading. The 3 that got away will ride straight back to Mather's, and he will send more men to cut you off before you get there. You would be riding right into their hands." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. "Then what do I do? I cannot go back and I cannot go forward." "You stay here," Zach said simply. "Winter is coming on fast in these mountains. Another few weeks and the passes will be snowed in until spring. Those men are not going to spend months searching these hills for you, not when they know you cannot get to Carson City anyway. You wait out the winter here, where it is safe, and in the spring when the snow melts, I will take you to the capital myself. Make sure you get there in one piece." "I cannot ask you to do that," Rebecca protested. "You have already risked your life for me. I will not impose on you for months." Zach's expression softened slightly, the hard edges of his face easing. "You are not imposing. Truth is, it gets lonely up here in the winter. Company would be welcome. Besides, you saw what happened out there. I am not in the habit of starting something and not seeing it through. I said you were under my protection, and I meant it." Rebecca looked around the small cabin. It was sparse but clean, with a cot in one corner, a table and chair, shelves lined with supplies, and the stone fireplace that dominated one wall. There was no second room, no privacy to speak of. "Where would I sleep?" "You can have the cot," Zach said. "I will make do with blankets by the fire. I have slept in worse places." "I cannot take your bed," Rebecca said automatically. "You can and you will," Zach replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. I was raised to be a gentleman, Miss Vaughn, even if I have been living like a hermit for 5 years. My mother would rise from her grave and haunt me if I made a lady sleep on the floor. Despite everything, despite the terror and the violence and the uncertainty, Rebecca felt a small smile tug at her lips. Your mother sounds like she was a formidable woman. She was, Zack agreed, and there was warmth in his voice now, genuine affection. Strongest person I ever knew. Raised me and my 3 brothers on her own after my father died in the war. She passed 2 years before I came out here, and not a day goes by I do not miss her. The coffee was helping to steady Rebecca's nerves, and she found herself looking at Zack with new eyes. He was handsome, she realized, though his face bore the weathered lines of someone who spent most of their time outdoors. There was a quiet strength to him, a solid dependability that made her feel safer than she had felt in days. Why did you come out here? She asked. 5 years ago, you said. That would have been 1866, right after the war ended. Zack's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I fought for the Union. Saw more death and suffering in 4 years than any person should see in a lifetime. When it was over, I could not stomach going back to cities and towns, being around crowds of people. The mountains are quiet, peaceful. They do not demand anything of you except respect. Rebecca heard the pain beneath his words, the old wounds that had not quite healed. She understood something then about this solitary man who had saved her life. He was not hiding from the law or from enemies. He was hiding from himself, from memories that haunted him worse than any flesh and blood pursuer. I am sorry, she said softly, for what you went through, and I am grateful that you were here today. If you had not been, I would be dead. Zack met her eyes, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding that did not require words. You are safe now, he said. That is what matters. The rest of that first day passed in a strange blur. Zack went outside to deal with the bodies, dragging them away from the cabin to a place where predators would dispose of them naturally. Rebecca knew she should have been horrified, but she was too exhausted to feel much of anything. She found herself simply moving through the motions, accepting the reality of her new situation because she had no other choice. When Zack returned, he showed her where he kept his stores. Dried meat, flour, beans, coffee, and other staples that would see them through the winter. He had a root cellar dug into the hillside behind the cabin where he stored potatoes and other vegetables he had traded for in Unionville. There was a stream nearby for fresh water, and plenty of game in the mountains if his stores ran low. You know how to cook? Zack asked as evening approached. I am not an expert, but I can manage basic meals, Rebecca replied. My mother taught me before she died. Good enough. We will take turns with the chores. I will not have you thinking you need to earn your keep by doing all the domestic work. We are partners in this until spring comes. Partners. The word struck Rebecca as odd, but also comforting. She was not a burden or a guest. She was a partner, an equal. It was more respect than she had received from most of the men she had worked with in Virginia City. That night, Rebecca lay on the cot wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind whistle through the pines outside. Across the room, Zack had made himself a pallet by the fire, and she could see his silhouette in the dim glow of the embers. She thought about how her life had changed so dramatically in just a few days. A week ago, she had been worried about nothing more serious than balancing ledgers and avoiding the unwanted attention of minors with more money than sense. Now she was hiding in a mountain cabin with a man she had just met, waiting for winter to trap her here for months. She should have been terrified. Instead, strangely, she felt a sense of calm settling over her. Zack had saved her life without hesitation, had offered her shelter without expecting anything in return, and had treated her with more respect in a few hours than most men showed in a lifetime. She did not know what the next months would bring, but she knew with absolute certainty that she was in good hands. The days fell into a rhythm more quickly than Rebecca expected. She woke each morning to find Zach already up, stoking the fire and putting coffee on to boil. They would eat breakfast together, usually cornbread and bacon or oatmeal with dried fruit, and then Zach would head out to check his trap lines or hunt for fresh game. Rebecca used the time to clean the cabin, mend clothes, and prepare meals. In the afternoons, Zach would return with whatever he had caught, and they would work together to prepare it, smoking meat or stretching and scraping hides. At first, their conversations were careful and polite, two strangers learning to coexist in close quarters. But gradually, as the days turned into weeks, they began to open up to each other. Rebecca told Zach about her childhood in Philadelphia, about losing her parents to cholera when she was 17, about making her way west with nothing but her education and her determination to build a new life. Zach told her about growing up in Ohio, about his brothers who had all settled into respectable careers after the war while he had chosen the wilderness, about the nightmares that still woke him sometimes in the dead of night. "You regret it?" Rebecca asked one evening as they sat by the fire, mending a tear in one of Zach's shirts. "Coming out here, being alone." Zach was quiet for a long moment, whittling a piece of wood with his knife. "I thought isolation was what I needed," he finally said. "Thought if I could just get away from everything, the memories would stop haunting me. But they do not really. They just have more room to echo." "Maybe you needed something else," Rebecca said softly. "Not isolation, just peace." Zach looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Maybe so. And maybe I am starting to find it." The first snow came in early November, dusting the mountains in white and making everything look clean and new. Rebecca stood outside the cabin, her breath forming clouds in the cold air, and marveled at the beauty of it. She had never experienced a real mountain winter before, and there was something magical about the silence that came with the snow, the way it seemed to muffle all sound and wrap the world in cotton. Zach came up beside her, carrying an armload of firewood. "It is beautiful now," he said, "but wait until we are snowed in for weeks at a time. You will be sick of looking at white." Rebecca laughed. "I suppose I will, but for now I want to enjoy it." They stood there together in comfortable silence, watching the snow fall. Rebecca was acutely aware of Zach's presence beside her, the warmth radiating from his body, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Somewhere over the past month, her feelings toward him had shifted from gratitude to something deeper, something she was almost afraid to name. She found herself watching him when he did not know she was looking, noticing the way his hands moved with such skill and confidence, the rare smiles that softened his stern features, the kindness that underlay everything he did. She thought she might be falling in love with him, and the realization both thrilled and terrified her. As November gave way to December, the snow piled higher and the temperature dropped. They were truly isolated now, cut off from the outside world until spring. But Rebecca did not feel trapped. Instead, she felt as if she had stumbled into a secret world, a place where time moved differently, and the concerns of civilization seemed very far away. They developed new traditions as the winter deepened. In the evenings, after supper was cleared away, Zach would read aloud from the small collection of books he owned: Shakespeare, Dickens, Whitman. Rebecca would sew or knit, working on projects she had started to pass the time, and listen to his voice rolling over her like honey. Sometimes they would talk late into the night, discussing philosophy and politics and dreams for the future. Other times they would simply sit in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts but comforted by each other's presence. It was during one of these quiet evenings, 2 weeks before Christmas, that everything changed. Rebecca was attempting to knit a scarf, but she kept dropping stitches and having to undo her work. She muttered in frustration, and Zach looked up from the rifle he was cleaning. "Need help?" he asked with amusement. "I am terrible at this," Rebecca admitted. "My mother tried to teach me, but I never had the patience for it. I am much better with numbers than needles." "Give it here," Zach said, setting aside his rifle and holding out his hand. Rebecca stared at him. "You knit?" "My mother taught all of us boys. Said we would need to know how to take care of ourselves if we ever found ourselves without a woman to do it for us. She was right, too. I have mended more socks and shirts than I can count." Rebecca handed over the knitting, laughing at the image of this rough mountain man sitting down to needlework. But Zach took the needles with easy familiarity, his large hands surprisingly deft as he fixed her mistakes and showed her the proper technique. "You have to keep the tension even," he explained, his fingers guiding hers. "Like this. See?" Rebecca was acutely aware of his touch, the warmth of his hands over hers, the way he had moved closer so he could demonstrate. She could smell wood smoke and pine on him, could see the stubble darkening his jaw, could feel the solid strength of him beside her. "Zach," she whispered, and he looked up, their faces suddenly very close. For a moment neither of them moved. Rebecca could see her own confused longing reflected in his eyes, could feel the tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Then Zach pulled back, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry," he said, his voice rough. "I should not have gotten so close. That was inappropriate." "No," Rebecca said quickly. "It was not. I mean, I did not mind." Zach stood up, pacing to the window and staring out at the dark night beyond. "Rebecca, I need you to understand something. You have been through a terrible ordeal. You are here because you have no other choice, because I am the only thing standing between you and the men who want to harm you. Any feelings you think you might have, they are not real. They are just gratitude and proximity and the strangeness of this situation." Rebecca set down the knitting and stood, her heart pounding. "Do not tell me what I feel," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions roiling inside her. "I am not some fragile, confused child. I am a grown woman and I know my own mind. Yes, I am grateful to you for saving my life. But that is not what this is." "Then what is it?" Zach asked, turning to face her. His expression was anguished, torn. "I do not know exactly," Rebecca admitted. "All I know is that when I am with you I feel safe, not just physically safe, but safe to be myself. You do not treat me like I am less because I am a woman. You listen when I talk, you respect my opinions, you make me laugh, and when you look at me I feel like I matter, like I am seen." "You do matter," Zach said hoarsely. "More than you should, that is the problem." "Why is that a problem?" "Because I am not the man you think I am." Zach's voice rose, and he turned away from her again. "You see someone who saved you, someone strong and good, but I have killed more men than I can count, Rebecca. I have done things in war that haunt me every night. I am damaged goods, broken in ways that will never heal. You deserve better than that. You deserve someone whole." Rebecca crossed the room until she was standing right behind him. She reached out and gently touched his shoulder, feeling him stiffen under her hand. "I do not want someone else," she said quietly. "I want you, broken pieces and all, because I see what you do not seem to see. Yes, you have scars. Yes, you have done things you regret. But you are also the man who took in a stranger without question. The man who risks his life to protect someone he barely knew. The man who reads poetry by the fire and knits scarves and treats me like an equal. That is who you are, Zach, not the things you did in war. This. Now, the man standing in front of me." Zach turned slowly, and Rebecca saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I am so afraid," he whispered. "Afraid that if I let myself care about you, something will happen, that I will lose you like I have lost everything else I cared about. I do not know if I could survive that." "You will not lose me," Rebecca said, reaching up to cup his face with her hand. "I am not going anywhere, not now, not ever if you will let me stay." For a long moment, Zach just looked at her, searching her face for any sign of doubt. Then, slowly, carefully, as if she were made of glass and might shatter at any moment, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when Rebecca responded, rising on her toes to press closer, the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent and real. Zach's arms came around her, pulling her against him, and Rebecca felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was right. This was real. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I am terrible at this," he said with a shaky laugh. "I have not courted a woman in over a decade. I do not know what I am doing." "That makes two of us," Rebecca replied, smiling. "We will figure it out together." And they did. Over the weeks that followed, as winter tightened its grip on the mountains, Rebecca and Zach's relationship bloomed like a flower in snow. They were careful with each other, respectful of boundaries and propriety despite their isolation. Zach continued to sleep by the fire, though sometimes Rebecca would wake in the night to hear him crying out in the grip of a nightmare. On those nights, she would go to him, wake him gently, and sit with him until the fear faded from his eyes. He would hold her hand like a lifeline, and she would talk to him in a low, soothing voice about anything and everything until he calmed. "Tell me about Philadelphia," he would say, and Rebecca would describe the city of her childhood, the cobblestone streets and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery on the corner, the way the Liberty Bell looked in the early morning light. Or she would say, "Tell me about your brothers," and Zach would talk about John and Samuel and Matthew, about the games they played as children and the men they had become. They learned each other slowly, carefully, building something solid and true. Rebecca discovered that Zach had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, that he could fix almost anything with his hands, that he sang off-key when he thought she could not hear him. Zach learned that Rebecca was stubborn and fiercely intelligent, that she had a temper when provoked, that she cried during sad parts of books but tried to hide it. Christmas came, and they made the best of it with what they had. Zach shot a wild turkey, and Rebecca used precious flour and sugar to make a pie. They gave each other simple gifts. Rebecca presented Zach with a new shirt she had sewn from fabric in his stores, and Zach gave her a carved wooden box he had made for her to keep her things in. It was beautiful work, the wood polished smooth and the lid fitted perfectly, and Rebecca treasured it more than any expensive jewelry. "I love it," she said, running her fingers over the carving. "And I love you." The words were out before she could stop them, and Rebecca froze, afraid she had said too much too soon. But Zach smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "I love you too," he said simply. "Have for a while now, if I am being honest. Just was not sure I had the right to say it." "You have every right," Rebecca said, and kissed him soundly. January and February passed in a haze of snow and cold and warmth. The cabin felt less like a prison and more like a sanctuary, a place apart from the world where only the two of them existed. They made plans for the spring, talking about how they would travel to Carson City together, how Rebecca would present her evidence to the authorities, how they would start a life together somewhere far from Virginia City and the men who had tried to kill her. "Where do you want to go?" Zach asked one evening as they lay side by side on the floor in front of the fire, Rebecca's head pillowed on his shoulder. "I do not know," Rebecca admitted. "I never thought much about it before. I was always just focused on surviving, on getting by. I never let myself dream about what I actually wanted." "Dream now," Zach encouraged. "If you could go anywhere, do anything, what would it be?" Rebecca thought about it, letting her imagination wander. "Somewhere green," she finally said, "with trees and water. Maybe a little farm where we could grow our own food. Nothing fancy. Just a place that is ours, where we can build something together." "That sounds perfect," Zach said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I have some money saved from selling furs." "It is not much, but it would be enough to buy land somewhere. Oregon maybe, or Northern California. Somewhere far enough from Nevada that your past will not follow us." "Our future," Rebecca corrected. "Not my past, our future." "Our future," Zach agreed. As March arrived and the snow began to melt, they prepared for the journey ahead. Zach made sure all his equipment was in good repair, that they had enough supplies for the trip, that his horse and Rebecca's mare were strong and well fed. Rebecca carefully packed the ledger and documents she had stolen, wrapping them in oilcloth to protect them from the weather. "Are you ready for this?" Zach asked the night before they were set to leave. "Once we step out of these mountains, everything will be real again. The danger, the complications, it will not be just us anymore." "I am ready," Rebecca said with conviction. "I am ready to finish this, to clear my name and make sure those men face justice. And then I am ready to start our life together. Really start it, not just dream about it." They left at dawn on a clear spring morning, the air crisp and full of promise. The journey to Carson City took 6 days, following trails that were muddy and treacherous from snowmelt. They saw no sign of Mather's men, and Rebecca began to hope that perhaps they had given up, that the winter had convinced them she was either dead or gone for good. Carson City was bustling when they arrived, full of miners and merchants and politicians. Rebecca and Zach went straight to the office of the territorial governor, and Rebecca presented her evidence to a serious-looking man in a fine suit who listened to her entire story without interruption. "This is damning evidence," he said when she finished, flipping through the ledger. "If these accusations are true, Carl Mathers and his associates will be facing serious prison time." "They are true," Rebecca said firmly. "And there is more. The men he sent after me they murdered. They tried to kill me, and when that failed, they tried to kill the man who protected me. Their names are in that ledger too." The official looked at Zach, who had been standing quietly in the corner. "You can corroborate her story." "I can," Zach said. "I killed 4 of the men who came after her in self-defense. The other 2 ran off. I will testify to that in court if necessary." "It will be necessary," the official said. "But I believe you. The mining companies have been complaining about theft for years, but they could never prove it. This," he tapped the ledger, "this is the proof they needed. You have done the territory a great service, Miss Vaughn. And you as well, Mr. Sullivan." It took 3 weeks for the case to wind its way through the courts, but in the end, justice was served. Carl Mathers and his remaining associates were arrested and charged with theft, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The 2 men who had escaped from Zach's cabin, Tom Hodges and Frank Delaney, were apprehended trying to flee to California. Cutter Hayes was found dead in a ravine, having apparently fallen from his horse during the escape. Billy Watson, the man Zach had wounded, turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence. Rebecca testified at the trial, her hands steady as she walked the jury through the evidence. Zach sat in the gallery, his presence a silent source of strength. When the verdicts came back, all guilty, Rebecca felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had not realized she was carrying. It was over. She was free. That night, in the small boarding house where they had been staying, Zach took her hand and led her to the porch where they could look out over the city. "So," he said, "where do we go from here?" "Wherever you want," Rebecca replied. "As long as we are together, I do not care where we end up." Zach reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. He opened it to reveal a simple gold band, nothing fancy but clearly made with care. "I know we have been living together all winter, and maybe that means we should have done this before," he said, his voice nervous in a way she had never heard before. "But I wanted to do it right. Rebecca Vaughn, you are the strongest, smartest, most amazing woman I have ever met. You brought light back into my life when I thought I was going to spend the rest of my days alone in the dark. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you have made me?" Rebecca's vision blurred with tears, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, of course I will marry you. I cannot imagine spending my life with anyone else." Zach slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed as the sun set over the Nevada mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. They were married a week later in a small church in Carson City, with the territorial governor's assistant and his wife serving as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple blue dress she bought with some of the reward money the mining company had given her for recovering their stolen gold. Zach wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but impossibly handsome. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Rebecca felt her heart might burst with happiness. They spent their wedding night in the finest hotel in Carson City, a luxury after months in the mountain cabin. But the next morning, they began their journey north to Oregon, following the California trail that so many pioneers had taken before them. They traveled slowly, stopping in small towns along the way, taking time to enjoy each other and the freedom of their new life together. In late May, they found what they were looking for: a beautiful valley in southern Oregon with a small creek running through it and enough cleared land for farming. The property came with a simple house, much larger than the mountain cabin but still modest, and a barn that needed some repair. Zach bought it with his savings and the money Rebecca had earned from her reward, and they moved in immediately. That first summer was full of hard work and simple joys. They planted a garden, repaired the barn, bought chickens and a milk cow. Zach built furniture while Rebecca sewed curtains and made the house into a home. They had neighbors a few miles away, a family with 3 children who welcomed them warmly and helped them adjust to life in Oregon. In the evenings after the work was done, they would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the valley, Rebecca leaning against Zach's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Are you happy?" Zach would ask, and Rebecca would smile. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she would reply. As autumn painted the valley in brilliant colors, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She told Zach over breakfast one morning, watching his face carefully to gauge his reaction. She need not have worried. His expression went from surprise to joy to tender protectiveness in the space of a heartbeat. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy about it?" Rebecca asked, suddenly nervous. Zach came around the table and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I am terrified," he admitted. "I do not know the first thing about being a father, but yes, I am happy. So happy I can barely stand it." The baby, a boy they named Samuel after Zach's favorite brother, was born the following spring on a warm April morning. Rebecca's labor was long and difficult, attended by the neighbor woman who had experience with childbirth. But when it was over and she held her son for the first time, she knew it had all been worth it. Zach was besotted with his son from the first moment he saw him. He would spend hours just holding the baby, talking to him in a low voice about everything and nothing, promising to be the best father he could be. "He is perfect," Zach said one evening as he rocked Samuel to sleep. "Just like his mother." "He looks like you," Rebecca replied, smiling at the sight of her two favorite men together. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, their farm prospered. Zach proved to be an excellent farmer, and Rebecca managed their finances with the same skill she had once applied to mining company ledgers. They expanded their land, bought more livestock, and built a small addition onto the house. They made friends in the community, attended church socials, and became respected members of their town. When Samuel was 3, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, and 2 years after that, another son they called Thomas. Their house was full of noise and laughter, of children's toys scattered on the floor and muddy boots by the door. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely perfect. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they lay in bed after tucking in their children, Zach pulled Rebecca close. "Do you ever think about that winter?" he asked. "About how we met?" "All the time," Rebecca replied. "I think about how terrified I was, running for my life. I think about how you stepped out of that cabin like some guardian angel. I think about how the worst thing that ever happened to me led me to the best thing in my life." "I think about it too," Zach said. "I think about the man I was before you came into my life, lost and angry and so alone. And then you appeared and everything changed. You saved me, Rebecca, as much as I saved you." "We saved each other," Rebecca corrected gently. "We did," Zach agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "Do you ever regret it, giving up your career, your independence? You were so good with numbers and business. Here you are just a farmer's wife." Rebecca propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, her expression serious. "Zach Sullivan, I am not just anything. I am your wife, yes, and proud to be, but I am also a mother, a farmer, a member of this community. I manage our books and help our neighbors with theirs. I teach our children to read and write. I have built a life here that means something. No, I do not regret any of it, not for a single second. I love you," Zach said simply. "More every day, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Rebecca said, settling back against his chest, "because I love you more every day too." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing of seasons and the growing of children. Samuel grew tall and strong like his father, with Zach's gray eyes and serious demeanor. Elizabeth was smart and spirited, always asking questions and getting into mischief. Thomas was gentle and thoughtful, the peacemaker among his siblings. Zach taught his children to ride and hunt and work the land. Rebecca taught them to read and write and think critically. Together, they raised children who were kind and capable, who understood the value of hard work and the importance of standing up for what was right. When Zach's brothers finally tracked him down in Oregon, there was a tearful reunion. They came with their families, amazed to discover that their quiet brother had built such a full life. They stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time they left, firm plans were made for regular visits. "I thought I had lost you to those mountains," John, the eldest brother, said as he prepared to leave. "But you found something there better than solitude. You found a home." "I did," Zach agreed, his arm around Rebecca's waist. "I found everything I did not know I needed." Rebecca's cousin from Carson City also visited several times over the years, always amazed at how much their lives had changed since that terrifying winter of 1871. They would sit on the porch, watching the children play, and marvel at how something so terrible had led to something so beautiful. As Rebecca and Zach grew older, their love only deepened. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had nursed each other through illnesses, supported each other through disappointments, celebrated triumphs together. They had built not just a farm, but a life a legacy they could be proud of. Their children grew up and started families of their own. Samuel married a sweet girl from town and took over running the farm. Elizabeth became a teacher, following in her mother's footsteps in her love of learning. Thomas went to medical school in Portland and returned to practice in their valley, ensuring the community had good health care. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Rebecca and Zach sat on their porch as the sun set, their hands clasped together. They were grandparents now, with 5 grandchildren between their 3 children and another on the way. 30 years, Rebecca said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and forever all at once. Best 30 years of my life, Zach replied. His hair was gray now, his face more lined, but his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had that first winter in the mountains. Mine too, Rebecca said. She squeezed his hand. Thank you. For what? For saving me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for everything. Zach brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for seeing something worth saving in a broken man hiding in the mountains. Thank you for being brave enough to stay. I would do it all again, Rebecca said. Every moment, every hardship, every joy. I would choose you every time. And I would choose you, Zach replied. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched over them that fateful day when Rebecca fled into the mountains and found salvation in the form of a solitary cowboy. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the sounds of their family inside the house. Children laughing, pots clanging as supper was prepared, life continuing in all its beautiful chaos. Rebecca leaned her head on Zach's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. She thought about the terrified woman she had been, running for her life with nowhere to go. She thought about the 6 men who had pursued her, intent on silencing her forever. She thought about the moment when gunshots rang out and 4 of those men fell, and the others fled into the forest, never to return. She thought about how one man's courage and kindness had changed the trajectory of her entire life. What are you thinking about? Zach asked, sensing her contemplative mood. I am thinking about how grateful I am, Rebecca said. That you were there, that you did not hesitate, that you saw someone in need and helped, even though you had no reason to. You gave me my life back, Zach. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Zach corrected gently. You brought me back from the edge just as much as I saved you from those men. We were both lost in our own ways, and we found each other. Rebecca smiled, lifting her head to kiss him softly. We found each other, she agreed. And I will never stop being grateful for that. As night fell completely over their valley, over their farm, over the life they had built together stone by stone and day by day, Rebecca and Zach remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. Inside, their family was warm and safe, the legacy of their love made manifest in children and grandchildren who would carry their story forward. The mountains where they had met still stood in the distance, silent and eternal, guardians of the secret place where 2 broken souls had come together and made each other whole. Rebecca looked at those mountains and sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that winter, for that cabin, for the twist of fate that had led her to exactly the right place at exactly the right time. She had run into those mountains to save her life, and she had found so much more. She had found love, partnership, purpose, and peace. She had found a man who saw her as an equal, who valued her mind as much as her heart, who stood beside her through every trial and triumph. She had found her home. And as Zach's arms tightened around her and he whispered words of love against her hair, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single moment of their journey together. Every hardship had been worth it. Every fear had been necessary. Every tear had led to joy. They had started with violence and desperation, with gunshots in the mountains and death on their doorstep. But they had built something beautiful from those ashes, something lasting and true. They had proven that love could bloom even in the harshest conditions, that two people could save each other simply by choosing to stand together. The story of how they met would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren for generations to come. How Rebecca had fled into the mountains with 6 men pursuing her. How Zach had stepped out of his cabin and changed everything with 4 shots and the courage to protect a stranger. How those 4 men had fallen and the others had fled, never to return. How 2 lost souls had found each other in the wilderness and built a love that would last a lifetime. It was a story of survival and redemption, of courage and kindness, of the transformative power of love. It was their story, written in the mountains of Nevada and completed in the valleys of Oregon, a testament to the truth that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the very best. And as they sat together under the stars, Rebecca and Zach Sullivan knew that their story had the ending it deserved. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had fought for their love and their life together, who had built something beautiful and lasting and true. They had found their happily ever after, and it was everything they had ever dreamed it could be.